There's no question that when it comes to athletics, men have a distinct advantage over women. It all starts at puberty, and it's not just the increase in testosterone, although that is a big part of it. Their heart becomes bigger, they have greater lung capacity, their bones are bigger, they have more oxygen in their blood, and a larger muscle mass. That's the reason we have women's sports in the first place, so that women can enjoy a fair competition. Some of the greatest women athletes of all time, Jackie Joyner-Kersee, Mia Hamm, Martina Navratilova, or Cheryl Miller, wouldn't have been able to compete at an elite level in their sports if they had to compete against male athletes. But now the very existence of women's sports and fair competition is being threatened by an executive order signed by President Joe Biden that will allow transgender females to compete against biological females in school districts and universities across the country. The executive order reads that children should be allowed to learn without worrying whether they will be denied access to the restroom, the locker room, or school sports. The order goes on to cite a 2020 Supreme Court case that has nothing to do with women's sports. In Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia, Gerald Clayton was a county employee who was fired when the county discovered that he was gay. The Supreme Court ruled that the firing violated Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And even though the act itself doesn't talk about sexual orientation or gender identity, the Supreme Court ruled that by intent, it does protect gay and transgender employees. But the Biden executive order made this leap in logic that the Supreme Court's determination about the intent of Title VII also extends to Title IX. Title IX protects women's sports at all schools and universities across the country that accept federal funds. Title IX makes certain that women athletes get the same opportunities as male athletes in competition and scholarships. In short, Title IX made women's sports what it is today by creating an equal playing field. President Biden's executive order set back women's sports and took away that equal playing field. It's a controversial and emotional issue because, of course, transgender individuals should be afforded equal rights, and it's difficult to make the exception when it comes to women's sports and transgender females who are biologically male. But the competitive advantage for those athletes is so great that if society were to allow them to compete in women's sports, they would be taking away equal rights from biological women athletes in the process. And you know who else agrees with that? Martina Navratilova, considered the greatest women's tennis player of all time and an iconic advocate of gay rights and women's sports, tweeted, "You can't just proclaim you're a woman and compete against women. There has to be a standard, and having a penis and competing against women would not meet that standard." Now, she could have been a little bit more sensitive and articulate, but Martina Navratilova knows firsthand about competing against transgender athletes. She famously played against Renee Richards, who sued and won the right to play at the U.S. Open against other women in 1977. Renee Richards almost beat Martina Navratilova in the women's finals. Navratilova at the time was 21 years old and ranked #1 in the world.
She was 43 years old, and I had my hands full. And she said herself, had she been 10 years younger when she transitioned, she would have kicked her behind, and I think she's right.
After the match, Martina became close friends with Renee Richards. She even hired Richards as her tennis coach. Now, Navratilova, a lesbian and a champion of LGBTQ rights, is under attack for her position on transgender athletes competing in women's sports. And another tennis icon And LGBTQ champion Billie Jean King has come to her defense. Billie Jean tweeted, "Let's listen to the science of transgender women competing in women's sports. Science is the true arbiter." Science, specifically biology, is pretty clear on the topic that biological males have a huge advantage over women, but really it's the courts that will decide, ultimately probably the Supreme Court, because right now there are several cases making their way through state courts filed by top high school and college women athletes who feel that state laws allowing transgender athletes to compete against them are unfair. In 2018, 2 transgender athletes dominated in the women's competitions at the Connecticut State Championships, finishing first and second, one setting a new state record. But it's not just a race for state records, it's a race for scholarship money assured to women athletes in Title IX. One such athlete is Selena Souls, who believes she lost a scholarship opportunity because she had to compete against the 2 biological male transgender athletes that I just showed you to get to the Connecticut State Championships. Selena is now one of several athletes across the country suing to overturn a state law. Her case seems destined for the U.S. Supreme Court.
Girls like Selena deserve the opportunity to compete on a level playing field, and equal opportunity is completely destroyed when you allow biological males to invade women's only athletic events, which is what is taking place in Connecticut and is what is started to actually hurt Selena's athletic career.
So the Supreme Court justices await Selena's case or some other case challenging transgender athletes competing in women's sports, and then we'll get a final decision. The future of women's sports hangs in the balance. I'm Larry Mendte. We'll talk again soon.